Good afternoon, gentlemen. We have no ladies. So for the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to give you a quick overview on some of the issues that you need to maybe keep in mind if you are thinking of targeting the Italian market. And first of all, by way of some background, just to give you an idea, it's a big market, 60 million people. GDP has been sort of relatively stable over recent years, ranging from -1 to sort of +1. This year they're talking about 1.7. It probably won't be 1.7 given the recent turmoil that we have seen in the markets. But I mean, the thing to bear in mind is just because we don't have growth rates of 10% or something in Italy like you have in China, doesn't mean that it's not a growth market. It's a stable West European market, similar to most other European markets. Food and drink is very important in Italy. Point to note there is that 20% of disposable income is dedicated to food and drink, which I think is the highest in the EU. The Italians like their food, and I suppose essentially Italy is, all other things considered, a premium market for most food products. Regional differences, obviously, if you look at Italy, it's a big country from Trentino down to Sicily, so there clearly are a lot of regional differences. And a point to note that is perhaps of some interest is in this area here between, shall we say, Bologna and maybe Rome, you have 800,000, nearly 1 million expats, a lot of whom have Anglo-Saxon kind of taste. So that might be something to bear in mind as an area to target if you have product that is sort of Englishy, let's say. Moving on, something on the grocery market. Italy, maybe it's not often people are not aware that Italy is one of the top 5 grocery markets in Europe. It's 4th in actual fact after Germany. The imports of agri-food products are in the order of 20 billion, so it's a big import market, and therefore Italy should be a priority when you are planning your exports. Because often I think Italy is somewhat relegated down the line. Maybe the home market comes first, and then maybe the UK and Holland and Germany, and Italy is often way down the line. But I think Italy should be looked at a little bit more optimistically. Looking here, this will give you a good overview picture of, let's say, where the opportunities might be. So just going through them, and the point to note here is maybe the net import position. So I've given you the imports and the exports. A big import requirement in fresh horticulture, that probably isn't of any interest to us, but it's something to note nevertheless. Fresh fruit of no interest, cereals of no interest. The big one, of course, is meat and livestock, and we have significant business in Italy in meat and livestock already, close on 3 billion. But following closely behind that is a big import requirement and a big net import requirement for fish and seafood, again in the order of 3 billion. The next big one is milk and milk products. That's mainly probably going to be, and is already, in the area of dairy ingredients, cheese powders, butter, skim milk powder, more in the industrial side, so it probably isn't of any interest to the sort of business that you guys are in. I mentioned cheese separately. Quite a big market, notwithstanding the fact that Italy produces a lot of cheeses, quite a big import market for cheese. These will be cheeses that are mainly upmarket, premium, maybe artisan type cheeses. And I think Ireland have opportunities in there. Maybe our prices can be a little bit strong, but there are opportunities in there. I mentioned confectionery products a little bit as an afterthought because it's not a big market. Again, if you're looking at that particular niche market, you'd be looking at, again, premium, very premium products, maybe some jams, maybe marmalades, chocolates, that sort of thing. And lastly, big opportunities, again, a big import requirement in the beverage and alcoholic drink sector. And we're fairly well established there as we stand in Italy. The net import position is a little bit distorted there because you're looking here mainly at exports of wine. So in reality, there are quite big imports of, shall we say, hard alcohol. I just mentioned pet food, by the way, in passing. Italy is a very big pet food market. Again, I don't think any of you are involved in pet food, but there's a big import requirement in Italy for pet food. Practically everybody in Italy has a dog, maybe even 2 dogs. And as you see, there's a massive net import requirement on pet food. Moving on, that's just the trends. Nothing much to say about that. That's pretty standard stuff on the trends that are apparent today. I suppose the point to note is that down here on this side of the line, you have the areas where the greatest growth is occurring currently. Over here on the left-hand side, more average or standard growth of about 1 and 2% per annum. So you're looking at the growth areas being convenience, indulgence, ethnic, and snacks. So in summary then at this point, what are the main areas of opportunity? We have touched on them. Meat and livestock is the big one. And I suppose you're not in meat and, well, somebody has just arrived us in meat and livestock. But in general, the important, I suppose, thing about meat and livestock is we're very well positioned in meat and livestock. And a lot of that can be leveraged to the advantage of other sectors that maybe want to go into the retail or into the food service, where there's already a good track record established by the meat and livestock, by the meat people. Fish and seafood, the next very big one. And we've mentioned that. Cheese, we've mentioned that, and you see the figure there with looking at specialty farmhouse type cheeses. Milk and milk products, we've mentioned that. Beverages and alcoholic drinks, and confectionery is the very last one. So I think they are the areas, if you're looking at Italy, them are the areas where there are opportunities. There really aren't going to be any worthwhile opportunities in Italy in things like, say, breads or cakes or muffins or these sort of things that they have in abundance at every street corner. These are the big ones, and I think this is where the focus should be. Moving on, talking about route to market. The retail sector in Italy is huge, and that's, I suppose, the one you have to look at seriously. 83% of the retail sector is the sort of modern, as it's called, modern retail sector, supermarkets, hypermarkets, etc. Relatively small discount, 10%, and then the traditional stores are quite small. That's just a slide to give you an idea. I think you can read it there of the market share, the retail market share. I don't want you to remember that other than just to note, and that's not even half the retailers that are in Italy, but it gives you some idea of where they're situated, one vis-a-vis another, the big one being Coppa Italia, then on down the line you have the Conads and the Carrefours and right down. But even if you take somebody here, just for example, like Bennett, like 2.5% of the market, you might say, well, they're small. But they're small in a very big market. I mean, Bennett have 48 supermarkets, hypermarkets across the north of Italy. So what looks small there is actually, in reality, can be quite big. What are some of the key characteristics of these multiple retailers? Well, fragmented, we have said that. But nevertheless, the top 10 retailers account for about 78% of the multiple channel. A lot of the chains are regionally based because they were absorbed from smaller chains over the years. So, for example, you have Bennett along the north, you have Esselunga mainly in, let's say, Milan and the big cities around Lombardy and Novara. Further south around Bologna, you'd have Conad. Down a bit further in Perugia, you have Pack 2000. So they tend to be regional, quite regional. Most chains purchase from locally based importers, distributors, but direct imports is growing, and in this case of the meat side, for example, a lot of the retailers would be importing directly. Looking now at food service, an important big market, 75 billion. It's the second biggest in the world after the US. The reason for that is because, I suppose, three things in particular. The tourist industry that you have in Italy, the population practically doubles. Something like 90 million tourists come to Italy in the course of a year. The Italians themselves don't go overseas on holidays very much. And they tend to eat out quite a bit. So it's a big food service market. 33% of total food is consumed out of the home. Like all other things in Italy, it tends to be fragmented, but is growing. But nevertheless, again, the top 40 companies would represent the bulk of the food service market. I'm talking here now about people like Mar and Quartiglia and Selecta and Bervini and these companies that are big in the food service business. Obviously, if you're looking at Italy, particularly from the consumer food side, not so much from the meat side, logistics is the big issue, and that really is a fancy way of saying how do I get the product from here to there. So essentially, there are sort of two different systems. The single stage system, which is simple, the product goes directly from me to the customer, and that's usually the case. And most retailers are equipped to operate that system. In the case of meat, say seafood and some private label products. Now, that's not to say that in many cases you won't still have to use intermediaries to get some seafood or get meat, but generally speaking, most of the retailers are able to handle meat and seafood going, let's say, directly from the supplier to the customer. In the case of the multi-stage system, where the flow of goods is interrupted at one or more stages, that would mainly apply to nearly anything outside of meat, and indeed even in many cases seafood. And in that situation, as you would understand, the goods can be consolidated, segregated, labelled. All kinds of interventions can be done with the goods in the meantime before they're moved on to the customer. A thing to note under that heading of logistics is the pallet size. In Italy, you're talking about Euro pallets. So that's important if you're delivering product in terms of what fits into a given space. The retailers often refer to them as CEN pallets, and I'm not sure if my figure there for a 40-foot container is correct. I think it is, but if it's not, I stand corrected. Now, moving on to what I call here stock management, in a situation which I don't think exists at the moment, where you would have, let's say, a lot of product going into different customers, then you'd be looking at something like warehousing facilities, where really you would deliver your product into let's call it a warehouse, and they would look after they'd receive the order, they'd prepare the product for delivery, they'd deliver it, they'd issue the invoices and so on. So really it would be like you just deliver in, and they would handle all of the detail and deliver out. And there are lots of distribution companies that have this kind of facility. Indeed, there are lots of companies that provide groupage both in Ireland and in Italy. So while this is a bit of a problem, it's not insurmountable. There are companies that do this, and I can give you, if you ever need them, plenty of names of companies that are involved in this area of logistics and distribution. A point to note, if you're in this, is that most of this kind of operation, they have this system called EDI ordering, which is really an electronic data-based computerized system where everything is done through a computer, the ordering, the delivery, the stock management, and the payments. That probably isn't something that any of you needs to concern yourselves with right now, but it's where that business is at if you were into that sort of activity. So in summary then, some of the general retailer requirements, and of course this will vary obviously from customer to customer, from product to product, but in general terms, you're looking at shelf life of 21 days, but it can be more. Typically, the product is accepted if the residual life of the goods is more than 2/3 of the total shelf life, and that's a fairly general rule of thumb. Short shelf life, you'd typically be delivering once or twice, maybe per week. Longer shelf life, once per week. Pallets we've mentioned are Euro pallets. Case requirements not applicable because normally product isn't displayed in cases. And payment terms is usually something like 60 to 90 days, which is quite long, and you need to keep that in mind if you're calculating your margins and your delivered prices and so on. Labelling, again, quite a big issue in Italy. This is governed by EU regulations, so in reality it's not much different to any other market, but Italy have a thing about labelling, because every other day of the week you pick up the papers, you'll read something about some labels being falsified, and there's always this kind of background fear that the product isn't what it claims to be. So this thing is monitored very, very carefully in Italy. So it's something you need, if you're producing a product for Italy, to be quite careful of. The main point to note is that if you're doing a private label product, the retailer or the customer is responsible for what goes on the label, otherwise it's your problem. The key things that must be noted is you have to have the product name, the ingredient in descending order of quantity, and if the ingredient if a product is part of the ingredient, like for example strawberry jam, you have to indicate the amount of strawberry jam specifically, or the amount of strawberries, I should say, in the jam, or the amount of raspberries, or whatever else it might be. The best before date has to be indicated as to in what position this is in the pack. My best advice in regards to labelling is, if you're sending in a product into Italy, look at what are the competing products. If you're sending in, for example, a cream liqueur, pick up a bottle of Bailey's, look at what they have on the label, or a bottle of whatever else it might be, and model it on what's there already. I think is the best bet, because this thing can change from product to product. But if there's something on the shelves already, then you have a pretty good idea that it meets most of the requirements. A comment on the customs and excise. This is only relevant to any of you who are in the drinks business. but it's, this is important, so I'll go through it reasonably quickly. In the case of alcoholic drinks, there are customs and excise to be paid, and the rate depends on the alcoholic content of the product. They have this system in Italy. I don't know if it exists anywhere else, where you put a strip stamp over the bottle. So there's quite an amount of work involved in this. So I say that the operation ideally should be done by the Italian importer within a bonded warehouse. I say ideally because in theory you can do this yourself if you're an exporter of alcohol, but it's very cumbersome and quite complicated, and you'd be better avoiding doing it yourself if you can. I don't think the customs here have any reciprocal arrangement with the customs in Italy. You'll get whatever information you need from that website I have on the board there, and how to source the strip stamps and so on. The excise duty is €8 plus something per litre, which I have on the board. It's easy enough to work that back if you need to. So if you're doing a cream liqueur that's 17% alcohol, you can work it back very easily as to what exactly is your excise duty. Your strip stamp, I have the cost of it on the board. All of these strip stamps have to be accounted for. There's a lot of documentation that goes with this kind of thing. You need a special glue, which is approved by the Italian customs. So all in all, there's quite a bit of bureaucracy around this, so that is why you're better having somebody in Italy handle it. So most retailers, if you were to get business with a retailer, they won't handle this themselves. They want this product delivered to them without all of this. So either you have to go through an importer, distributor who will do this, or alternately you can find somebody who will charge you a fee to unload the bottles, source the strip stamps, put them back on, and load them on the truck and send them off down to your customer. So, and you're still supplying the retail. So that's slightly different than going through an importer. An importer will take the product out of your hands and then sell it on. So you have both options, but it's complicated, quite a complicated area, and you're better one way or another going through somebody on the Italian side. Language barrier, I mentioned, is a potential, let's say, barrier to trade, but it's nothing to get unduly worried about. I've never seen business yet being impeded by people not being able to speak the language, and if you have a problem with language, you have the Board B office, and there's plenty of other people that are available for language translations and other such services. Payment terms. I don't think payment is an issue nowadays. I mean, people often have the feeling that somehow I won't get paid in Italy. That used to be the case 20 years ago, but as far as I believe, there is no longer any bigger risk getting paid out of Italy than there is getting paid out of anywhere else. Your payment terms are 60 to 90 days, and obviously the long payment period needs to be factored into your delivery price. It's prudent, of course, to be careful and take all the usual precautions and get credit reports, but in general I don't think you have any bigger risk of not getting paid out of Italy than out of anywhere else. So, doing business in Italy, just a few comments in a general sense. I say the market is not a mystery. I mean, some people think Italy, gosh, it's a long way away, they speak a strange language, there's a lot of bureaucracy. It really isn't any different to any other market. It's the same issues apply, and I'm sure those of you who are dealing in the UK or dealing in France, most of what I've said to you, you will have come across already. The buyers, in my view and in my experience, tend to be less formal than in other countries. The earlier speaker this morning at the very first presentation was speaking about how buyers don't want to be there to kick the tires, I think was the term he used. Well, I think Italian buyers do want to kick the tires a little bit. They're more informal than others, and a lot of it is relationship. So it's important to create a relationship and to get to know the customer, and I think you can build up a very good long-term business through that informality. Customers are often looking for new or original products. They're not necessarily looking for innovation. I think that first speaker this morning also spoke about innovation. Bring me something that's innovative, he said. I don't think the Italians are necessarily looking too much for new innovative products, because they're very conservative in what they do. But they can be looking for products that are different to what they have themselves. And a lot of the Irish products can fit into that category. Moving on, some practical steps. I'm just conscious of the time here. Well, we're still okay. Some practical steps to the market. Well, obviously, the first thing you do is you analyse the opportunity. If there is an opportunity, that's to say you look at the size of the market, the profitability. Is this kind of a product on the market? Visit the market and see for yourself what's the competing products, and get as much information as you can about the competing products, so that you have as much technical information when eventually you go to your meeting. Identify your potential customer. That isn't as difficult as it might seem, because you'll meet potential customers at marketplace, you'll meet them at trade fairs. You know, the Board B offices have lots of potential customers. So potential customer isn't the most difficult thing. It's doing the business with the potential customer that's maybe more difficult. Set up an appointment and meet this customer and send product samples. And the speaker this morning spoke about product samples. We have lots of examples of product samples not being sent when they should have been sent. And it's crucial to send the product sample and get it there, or bring it with you when you're going to the meeting. Have your delivered price guidelines in your head. I use the word guidelines because a lot will change when you sit down at the meeting. Like, for example, say it in the next point, you must clarify with your customer when you sit down to talk to them their specification, their labelling. We've spoken about that. The quantities they want. Are they going to take 1 truck a week, 1 truck a month? Is it, you know, or half a truck? Is it a 20-foot container, a 40-foot container? What is it? Is it 2 pallets? Because that all affects your price. Your delivery destination, are you going to Rome or Milan or Perugia, or are there split drops? So all of that you need to clarify with your customer, and that will affect your eventual final calculation of your delivered price. Agree your promotional strategy and your payment terms. And that's essential, because the Italians have this term contributo, where they want to see some money on the table, or over the table, or under the table. And you need to be very clear when you're fixing your price. What is the promotional requirements? Is this price fixed so that there's no more required of me in terms of offering any contributo, in terms of offering any free product, in terms of offering any support for promotions? You need to be very clear about that, because otherwise it'll come back to haunt you. I've suggested you forward your label sample to the customer for sign-off. And normally they will send you a document then with your bank details, and you formalise all of that. But if you can get the customer to sign off on the label, then all the better. And then wait for your order and for dispatch. Well, that's, you know, I suppose a bit ambitious, but that's the idea. So some of the highlights of the Italian market. In summary, we've touched on them. It's one of the largest markets in Europe for food and drink. It's one of the highest added value markets in the world, and all other things being equal, and this is probably a generalized statement, for nearly any product, any given product, the Italian market will pay a higher price probably than most other markets. It might be harder to get in there. There might be a lot of finessing to do and a lot of courtship, but the prices for the value added and for the good product, the good quality premium products are high in Italy. I suggest therefore that it's an ideal market for high quality food and drink products, which is where Ireland, I suppose, is aiming ultimately. There are opportunities for private label suppliers. We're probably not gone that far down the road here yet on that one. A big food service market. I've listed the areas where I think you have the global opportunities are in meat, fish and seafood, cheese, dairy products, that's mainly ingredients, alcoholic drinks, and I put in premium confectionery, but I think this is very limited, and it would be very premium. You might be looking at something like maybe some really quality chocolates, or maybe some really upmarket jam, marmalades, something like that. It's not an easy market, but it's not a market for everyday run-of-the-mill breads or cakes or scones or ready-prepared meals or that sort of thing. Italy isn't really the place to go. I think these are the key big segments where there are opportunities. We've said the market is fragmented, but it's concentrating, and I don't think payments are an issue any more than they are anywhere else. You're as likely to get paid out of Italy as you are out of anywhere else. So I conclude, and I say Italy is open for business, which is, I suppose, stating the obvious. Thank you. Just one, I haven't any slide here now, but Switzerland it was down originally with Germany. Actually, Switzerland in the recent past is covered out of Italy. So I'll just make 1 or 2 comments on Switzerland, which might be pertinent. There are rules for everything in Switzerland, which you probably know. You might be surprised to hear that, but there are. Because Switzerland is not in the EU, there are duties and levies to be paid on practically all commodities, and customers need import licenses. So it's quite it's a bit like the excise duty that we touched on here earlier. So it's quite complicated. Depending on how badly they need your product in Switzerland, they will make the customs duty more difficult or less difficult. They'll make getting the product in harder or easier, depending how much they want your product. So I think in summary, in Switzerland, you're practically because of that, forced, if I can use that word, to deal with an import agent on the ground who will handle all of that paperwork and deal with the customs and deal with the whole business of getting the product in. Because even for something, say, like cheese, just to take one example, like there could be 40 different possible different kinds of excise custom tariffs to be paid on this, depending on the fat level, whether it's sheep cheese, whether it's goat cheese, whether it's hard cheese, whether it's soft cheese. So it's a major job. So you're better dealing with an importer, an import agent who has access to the customs and who knows all of that stuff. And I think somebody is opening the door at 3:05. We have about 2 or 3 minutes left, and thank you for your time.